for joining us first. Let me just say hello.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me. I can't tell you what a pleasure it is. It's just a wonderful opportunity for me to get to talk with people who are working on the front lines here. It's always a pleasure to talk with practitioners and people who are living and breathing this work every day. And it's always great to work with mass mentoring. It's always such a pleasure, Beth, and with you. Thanks for having me.
So you and I had this conversation and this whole concept of like a view of mentoring right now. That's when that got born. And we were talking about these times and that we were in, and it led us to kind of think about what is it that the wisdom of the field. So we're all trying to figure out the best things to do right now. And none of us have really been mentoring in the time of a pandemic. I mean, I don't know anybody who has. And it was refreshing for me to speak with you because you started to bring up kind of some of the things that we do know. And actually, it's very interesting because both you and Lily always talks about this. What are the knowns and what are the unknowns? And how do we kind of think about, right now, we're all trying to scurry around and do the right thing and the best thing for young people. And so we're trying to do the best that we can, but if we really want to do the best, we've been promoting research-based work for so long. So what is it that we have to kind of think about given the times that we have and given the data that you know so well?
Right. So, you know, Beth, you say it well when you say, you know, none of us have been in this situation before. I mean, that's what makes this such a challenging time. And I think the word unprecedented, although it's been said many times over the past couple months, it still remains true. These are unprecedented times. We're all trying to navigate places where there's not really a rule book or a roadmap for us. And everyone's just really trying to figure this out as we go. I mean, thank goodness for some of these tools that we have in place in modern society, like this Zoom sort of platform that's allowed us to sort of navigate this differently than if we didn't have these sorts of tools. But it does sort of feel like it throws everything up and it's like, oh no, now what do we do? And, you know, like you, I think, as you were saying, Beth, it's so helpful to remind ourselves and ground ourselves in what we do know. And there is still a lot that we know. And it's funny, I think some of what we know the most strongly oftentimes gets discounted, dismissed, or forgotten. And that is, I think it was one of the headers of these slides. It might even be the title for this, one of the titles for this gathering, which is that relationships matter. And that is just as true as it can be, and was before the pandemic, is now, and will be after, is that these, you know, relationships of all sorts really matter, and they matter in really profound ways right now because we're living without them in the way that we've always known them. So as great as these virtual connections are, they aren't the same as being in person with people and being able to really connect and be in the same space. So it's really brought into bold relief, I think, how much relationships matter to all of us in new ways, and kind of a reminder. So I think it also speaks to the incredibly important role that mentoring programs have to play during this pandemic, because the need for relationships has just never been greater. You know, I think, what's that cliche, you know, now more than ever, it gets overused, but I just can't help but think that about the need for mentoring. I mean, it seems to be as strong now as it ever was, if not more than ever. The need for these kinds of connections that really are lifelines. Janine, I had a slide in there that's a really simple one. It's like, this we know, and then it has like social support and risk of resilience. You want to just pop that up? I mean, it's funny because we have these different frameworks for thinking about relationships and how important they are, and it kind of depends on what flavor it is or what theory you subscribe to, but these things have been around for a long time. So it's this idea of, go back, it's that one right there. You got it, Janine, thank you, perfect. This idea that relationships matter. So some people think of it in terms of social support. There's just a very robust research literature on the importance of knowing that if you need somebody, if you need something, there are people that you can call on to help you, whether you call on them or not. Knowing that you have them actually makes a difference. So I think that's important to keep in mind during these times when people may not be able to stay connected in the same way. Knowing that somebody's out there and in your court still really matters. I think the Search Institute's been talking a lot about developmental relationships and has developed that framework. The stuff that's in that framework is stuff that's been around lots of places for a long time. It's, you know, that relationships matter and being able to connect with people really matters. The thing that I was raised on was the Stone Center and Wellesley College, and they talk about growth promoting relationships. Same idea, right? This stuff is in the air and it's been all around us for a long time, and it all remains very true. Protective factors, that was sort of the birth of mentoring, not its original birth, but kind of its modern day birth in the 90s when there was all this research on risk and resilience. And we found out that kids who have a strong relationship with an adult fare better under all sorts of risk circumstances than young people who don't have that. And that sort of launched the mentoring movement. And interestingly, there's a modern day version of that, this positive childhood experiences. Some of you may have heard of the framework of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, it's called. So it's a framework to really think about how when people have really negative experiences growing up, like abuse, physical, sexual, psychological, as well as just other forms of adverse childhood experiences, a whole range of them, that things can pile up and it can be really bad for kids. Interestingly, there's a team of researchers recently who said, well, what about the corollary? What about positive childhood experiences? What role do they play? And they took a big data set and crunched this and found that, guess what? Kids who have strong relationships do better, even in the face of high levels of adverse childhood experiences, that they're protective factors. So the conclusion of this article that was just published, and in fact, I can send a link around 2019, just published, was what we ought to be doing is helping build relational networks for kids. And that's really where we need to, place our efforts, so that even when bad things are happening, which we can't always prevent, we're trying to prevent, we want to prevent, can't always do it. There is this other thing that we can also be doing, which is trying to provide kids with the supportive relationships they need that can sometimes buffer those adverse childhood experiences. So this we know, right? The work, the business that we're all in, and the work that you all are doing in the field to really connect young people up with supportive relationships really matters. It's mattered for a long time. It matters a whole lot today. And I think we're going to be dealing with the consequences of this pandemic in terms of people's social and emotional states for some time to come. And I think that mentoring is going to have a really important role to play in that as well.
Yeah, so I'm also going to keep inviting you all that feel free to raise your hand and put in the chat box, because Janine's role is to interrupt us, and we're prepared to be interrupted, because your comments and your questions are much more important than mine. So I'm going to keep pausing to let you do that. So Renee, this is really fascinating, because as we've been listening to programs, youth serving organizations that are doing youth development and peer leadership and mentoring one-to-one and site-based mentoring, one of the questions that keeps coming up is also, what is the role of the mentor now? That, the role seems to be changing in this landscape. So for some programs, the role might have been, I'm going to take someone out and I'm going to do these activities. Or, one of my colleagues was like, we're a cooking, our youth development program was wrapped around learning skills, life skills and professional development skills, and around cooking and culinary arts. And so you think, like, we did all this around something, and now you took the something away, and our adults that are coming to be in relationship with young people, it's going to be different. And people are kind of thinking about that. So I'm just wondering what you have to say about that. Or
Yeah. Well, I think in some ways what people are I'm guessing what people are already doing is they're figuring out ways they can do some of those things in another format. So using FaceTime to cook together, or Zoom, or these other sorts of things. But then there are ways where you just can't replicate whatever it is you've been doing. Either it might be there's no broadband in the home, so you can't do these kind of virtual chats, so that's not going to work. It might be whatever the activity was is not replicable under the given circumstances. I think the really important thing, and I bet programs, the folks on this call are doing these things and have been thinking a lot about it, would be likely great to hear what folks have been up to in this domain, is trying to think about the ways that people can stay connected under these circumstances. So even if it's the how do we stay connected until we can be together again kind of thing, and it doesn't have to be big. So here's Janine's just queued us up beautifully here. So here's this, I saw this on Facebook the other day, so I stole this off of Facebook, this slide, this little Pooh and Piglet little scenario here. And this really, to me, captures so much about what mentoring at the core can be about. And it's this sense of somebody just being there for you. And there might be all of this other stuff going on around it that's really important as well. This kind of development in particular domains, or skill building, creating opportunities, all that happening. But at the end of the day, you also have to know that people are in your court. So if you're not able to be doing all that skill building stuff, knowing that that person's still there for you, I think can go a long way, especially right now. So Pooh and Piglet have this little conversation here on a difficult day. So I was also thinking about it's a metaphor for kind of what we're living. We're living in difficult days right now. And, you know, Pooh's having a difficult day and Piglet asks, do you want to talk about it? And Pooh says, no, I don't think I do. And Piglet says, okay. And then says, you know, Pooh's like, what are you doing, Piglet? Well, I'm hanging out here with you, basically, right? Is what Piglet say. Nothing. I just know that on difficult days, I often don't feel like talking about it either. But they're so much easier when you've got someone there for you, and I'll always be there for you, Pooh. It's just so cute, right? And then Pooh sits there and he's thinking about it, and he thinks to himself, you know, he thought that his best friend had never been more right. So, you know, I'm thinking about ways that mentors can communicate, I'm still there for you. I may not be able to be with you in the ways that we've been together, but I'm still there with you. I'm still thinking about you. You're on my mind. I'm wondering how you're doing. I'm looking forward to when we can be together again. And I like this metaphor too, because it doesn't have to be big, grand gestures. And you might not be able to sit next to each other like Pooh and Piglet are, but you can drop a card in the mail, or you can send a text message, or you can drop something off. You know, if it's the structure of the mentoring where you know where the mentee lives and you can drop a little something off on the doorstep and leave it for them. You know, those kinds of things. Just, they don't have to be grand gestures, just small gestures that let that young person know you're still there for them and in their court. The other thing I like about this little blurb here is that Piglet is saying at the very end, when Pooh's reflecting on Piglet, he describes him as his solid, reliable Piglet. And I think that's something else that mentors can be right now, is solid and reliable. So you may not be able to be there in person, but you can be this sort of solid force that's in the background, holding steady, being present in whatever way you can, and waiting until you can get back together again.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I like when you say it doesn't have to be a lot, like consistency and sort of just that solidness is so important. And it doesn't really have to be all the time and a lot, and yet it's those small things that make the difference. And I think for some people, it's hard when families are going through so much. So
Yes.
Another of those things that we're hearing from programs is that, you know, my program was doing this, and now we're having to like hear from families that food is an issue, or housing becomes an issue, or, you know, families are losing their income. And so the needs of our families is going so far up that their commitment or ability, you know, to commit to being part of a mentoring program or a youth development program is getting harder. And I think about your 3-piece stool. To make mentoring work, it takes those 3 legs of a stool, you know, the commitment of the mentor, the commitment of the young person, and the commitment of family and caregivers. And that's hard when basic needs aren't being met.
Yes. Yeah, I'm thinking a couple things in response to that, Beth. That's so true. So one, I'm thinking about the corollary of you all in mentoring programs being on the front lines. As I was saying at the very beginning, I think that's really true. So we think about our healthcare workers who are on the front lines right now, who are having to carry sort of seeing people be sick and deal with the kind of the fallout of that. I think you all working in youth serving programs, you're seeing the front lines in a different way. You're seeing the consequences of the shutdown, the economic shutdown on families, and what that really means for families' everyday lives. So I think it's really important to think about ways to take care of ourselves, you know, during these times, because we're all carrying a lot, and to have to bear witness to that kind of suffering that these families are experiencing is very real. And it can be easy to sort of like think, oh, well, I just need to deal with it and whatever. No, it's very real that you're witnessing this and having to really see what families are encountering, which I think is really important. And then it can feel like you have to fix it all, which we know we can't. Like we knew we couldn't before, and you can't now. And so you have to sort of stay in your lane as a program, as it were, kind of what are the things you can do in this moment, and what can you offer to young people and to their families, and to continue to be able to offer that and to hold steady kind of in the face of all of this. But it can feel very daunting when you see how big all of those other needs are and how very real and profound they are. And so, you know, really and truly seeing people suffering. There was something else about what you had said, Beth, that it made me think of, but now I can't remember. So maybe it'll come back to me.
I still want to invite people to come on to the conversation with us. it's not every day that we try to open up a line. And I'm almost tempted just to open up your lines so that you can just
people jump in.
Do you want to give it a shot?
We can try it. Yeah.
All right.
We did this with a graduation last night. We had our graduation for our doctoral students, and when they opened up the line, it actually worked pretty well, I have to say.
All right, Deneen, open up everyone's line. Let's do it. And if you have a lot of background noise at your home, feel free to mute yourself.
But that way, then people can be in charge for themselves. If they want to unmute, then they can unmute. Yeah.
But feel free to jump in on and comment.
Oh, I'm seeing one in the post here. This is a difficult one. Oh, Janine, I'm sorry.
Oh. Wait, Janine, we can't hear you. Oh. Here she comes.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm on two devices and trying to figure out which one has the sound. So, from Snelling, a question. What is your opinion, Renee, on our responsibility as mandated reporters and the space we are now interacting with young people is in their home? Should there be some additional or different guidelines or protocols we follow as facilitators of the mentoring?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it's interesting. We're wrestling with this in our research because we've moved some things. We were surveying in schools, and now we're zooming into people's houses. And that's really different than surveying a child in a school. You know, it's under a different set of parameters. So it does raise these kind of ethical dilemmas. I have to confess, I'm not really sure. I mean, I think that we still have responsibility as mandated reporters. We have to protect kids. And in some ways that responsibility is greater not right now because the eyes that would be on kids aren't on kids right now because kids aren't in school. So there's some sort of safety nets that young people don't have access to in this particular moment. At the same time, we know that families are stressed in really different ways and are kind of suffering the consequences of this pandemic. So that's, you know, important to bear in mind as well. So I don't think it takes away our responsibility as mandated reporters. But I do think it takes some careful thought. And some folks may have been wrestling with this and have thoughts about it to weigh in. I think it's such an important question in a very difficult time.
Do other folks have anything they want to?
Or how your programs are thinking about this?
Hi, this is Rebecca Mooney from Melrose. I was just thinking about, you know, I love the analogy of Winnie the Pooh and Piglet and how some relationships, you know, they would rather be doing things together than talking, you know, and I think that's part of the challenge of this kind of trying to maintain the relationship remotely is it's sort of based on the idea that kids want to talk. And I like your idea of dropping off a little gift. I think that's a good one. I think texting sometimes can be better than Zoom with kids. But I wondered if you had any other ideas, like things that they can do that don't really require direct talking to each other.
Right, because kids, engage in relationship through activities and action. I mean, that's a funny sort of thing. So we think about, you know, sometimes relationship is being talking, but relationship is also doing. And it's really the way, particularly younger kids have relationships is through engaging in shared activities, doing stuff together. That's really kind of where the heart of the relationship is. And so as that's taken away, you know, that makes it really difficult. And my daughter's a teenager and she's still that way. Like, you don't sit down and have a conversation with her. That goes nowhere. You have to be doing something with her. And in the context of that, then that's where we kind of, you know, are able to connect. So I think it is hard to replicate in these times. If there's a shared activity that you could each be doing and then text each other a picture of it, you know, like some craft that you might share, or I saw this and thought, I got muted. Let me unmute myself. Is that better? Can you hear me now? Okay. this thing made me think of you because I know how much you like to do this. You may not be able to do the things together, but to find ways to connect. And I have been thinking about that a lot. And some of again, people on the line may have been thinking a lot about this, that those relationships, particularly with younger children or ones that are really based around something that you were doing together that you can no longer do, it may be really shifting the expectations of the relationship for now. So it's not like it's going to be the same relationship, but no, I'm here. I just want to reach out. I just want to let you know I'm still thinking about you. I'm still connecting with you, and I'm looking forward, again, to when we can be back together. Because there may not be a replacement, for something that you could do together. I mean, and I know there's a lot of stuff online, reading stories, watching movies. My daughter's doing with her friends. They queue up shows and watch together, and they've got it on, and then they talk. They've got have FaceTime, and then the movie's going. But even so, that, it all depends on what a kid really enjoys, what their access to resources are, and what that child really enjoys doing. And so trying to force something isn't going to work really well. So it may just be being a reminder that you're there during this time, even when you're not able to be around and be together and doing things together.
And I think we have 2 more questions. I saw Herbert, I think you raised your hand perhaps, and then Mobile has their hand raised as well. So you unmute it yourself, and then we'll get to Mobile after you.
Sure. No, hi, Dr. Spencer. Thanks for joining us. My comment was exactly about what you said. The eyes that weren't there on the kids are now. We have experienced a sharp increase in domestic violence in our community.
Mm-hmm.
We've had to call police and DCF. We have an increased reporting on our end as well. And it's the challenge that I have is that when, I'm talking to a police officer and he says, well, it's not okay. There's no marks on her, or there's nothing, she has a nice room and she has things. And I'm like, yeah, but, there was a threat, and there was physical violence. So it's like, that's all I know. And without the physical assessment, I'm taking the word of a police officer that may or may not have been trained
Mm-hmm.
In how to address and identify this kind of situations. So my question is, that's my comment, really. It's not a question, is how do we, or maybe how do we create protocols that address this kind of increase? Because we already have our protocols for when it happens and we see it, right? When it happens within our context where we have that the student at our location. But now we're having to do reports on something that it seems so far away and the same token seems so close. So our protocols are there. We have been following them. We have an increased reporting. We have an increased relationship with the police, which is not in a good way, but necessarily in a good way all the time. But in the population that we serve, it's in Lynn, and it's everything that you hear about in terms of the context of how police brutality does impact, people of color, immigrants, and so on and so forth. So that's my comment, and I don't really have an answer for that either. It's just we're dealing with it, and we're seeing the numbers go up, and the number of children being impacted go up, and still have to stay focused on how we're gonna get in college, how we're gonna get the scholarships, have conversations with your mentors over the internet or over the phone, so you can apply to those things to try to get that situation into something that is more productive. So, but we really don't have an answer. We're just trying to deal with it.
I know, and it's so much to deal with, and it makes so much sense, right? You've got families are under more stress, just really high levels of stress, which just ups the risk for all of that kind of stuff, enormously. And then, as you're saying, you don't have the best responders on the scene, people with the kind of training. And then when you talk about these kind of, really negative relationships between law enforcement and communities of color. You know, just not a great recipe for kind of a positive resolution of some of these circumstances. It's very serious business. Yeah, I don't have great answers for you. These are really pressing and critical challenges. And I think what you're doing in terms of talking about, you know, following your protocols and then also staying focused on the things you can be doing with these young people is really important, and continuing to think about their futures, you know, and those opportunities, kind of what lies ahead and what role you could be playing, and continuing to help them, you know, move towards a brighter future. Because that's one of the other really serious problems with this pandemic is, you know, that the inequities are just growing, unfortunately, like that it's hitting our most vulnerable youth the hardest. And so where there's already inequity, that I think that gap is widening. And so again, the role for your programs are just more important than ever before to be addressing this.
And I think Mobile was up next. Do you want to?
Yeah. Hi, y'all. This is Mobile coming out of Boston, representing Silver Lining Institute at Silver Lining Mentoring. And I didn't have a question, but wanted to offer 2 activities I'd heard about when I was on a couple of national calls with youth who are alum of foster care, and some ways that they're maintaining engagement during this time that I thought were innovative and fun that other folks could do. One of those being having a virtual like sort of collage, essentially. So they're creating, there's a group of young people who someone created like a paint, like on your paint app, they just drew a picture on there and they sent it around, a virtual mural, and they sent that picture to the next person who added to it in paint and then sent that around. They've continued to do that. So they have a growing virtual mural they can all contribute to. It doesn't require sitting down to talk to each other. It's just a nice way to stay connected in that way. And the second piece, I completely forgot, but if I remember, I will pop back and let you fine folks know.
Please do it, because it's great to hear these ideas. It's one of the nice opportunities about having so many people on the call, is a chance to sort of share ideas like that.
Anyone? Yeah, Lily, come on.
Just on the idea engine, and I don't have it fully thought out, but I was also on a call with a program in California this morning, and they were looking into ways of engaging young people through, dare I say it, through their Xbox. There was, this sort of awareness that, and I have teenagers in my home that are gamers, and they are talking to each other.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to have an Xbox, let's be very clear. But so now they're thinking about, I know they were talking about creating a tournament. Mind you, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm gonna keep it real, but creating a tournament that required the young people to sign into one of their mentoring either programs or activities. So it kind of like would force them into at least that universe. So I'm happy to, as I learn more, happy to push that out. And, as we're trying to think, that's one thing about this pandemic, I will say, that it is forcing us to be creative, and it's pushing us in ways that we just, may not have thought of. And frankly, I'm not a huge fan of Xbox, but you know what? It's not about me, right? It's about how do we reach young people where they're at, so.
Yeah. And, I think there's an adultism that we have to check. And now more than ever, youth voice is really important, that we listen to young people, because Cameron brought up one day in our team meeting, I think it's really important that we could learn a lot from them, that they're using social media in ways, and I think there's an age issue here, but I think teenagers and young adolescents are using social media in ways and connecting. Some of it we know as adults, and some of it we don't even know is going on. And we might learn about connecting, and we might need to check our attitudes about how they're connecting. And we might learn something about how to stay connected, how to be in touch, that we don't even know yet. And so I just want to put that out there, that we heard some adults commenting about young people not using Zoom properly, or needing to learn how to show up at a Zoom meeting. And, I can't say that I wouldn't have said that. I might have said that sometime. But, do we need to tell them how to do it? Or maybe they need to tell us something. And I think that there might be something that we have to, hear and grow from too in this time. So they might be more adept at some of the things that we don't even know about. And maybe we could take some lessons. So yeah, I think, and my feelings about Xbox might be my feelings about Xbox. And yet they're talking to everyone around the world, and they could be playing 24 hours a day, and we don't even know how much they're connecting and feeling really supported. And I could join that maybe. They might not want me, but yes.
So I put the
Hands up.
order for questions in the chat box.
Good.
So I saw Evan, Linda, Mobile remembered what they were going to say. And then Herbert, I think I saw you again. And then Leah had sent us a question privately that we'll get to at the end of that.
Okay, Evan, you're up.
Awesome. Hey, folks. This is Evan Hubbard from Silver Lining Mentoring in Boston. And just hopping in the idea train, we've definitely faced this as well. We've heard from a lot of our mentors for our little ones who are anywhere between 6 to 12, also just really struggling to engage over the phone. And just for context, we work with young people who are impacted by foster care. So a lot of them are in residentials, congregate care. They've got people all around them, so they don't have that normal privacy they've had before with their mentor. But some of the ideas we put out there to them are things like, could you do like a Mad Libs together over the phone? So if they don't have access to video, it's not necessarily a conversation, but it can get them, kicked off with something that is silly and relatable. Some of the mentors have gotten through 2 sentences and the mentee changes gears. Some of them have gotten a little bit further along. But we're really trying to push out those activities that can be done over the phone if video is not an option for them. And we've also had mentors who have sent games to their mentees. So a mentor recently sent a game of Battleship so they can play together over the phone, even though they both are working from different game sets. So they're trying all kinds of different things. So we're trying to collect an activity list and are putting that out to our mentors to help them just think creatively with, there are tons of activities you can try, and just try to find something that will capture their attention even for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea, thinking about which games you can do that way, that you can tell each other kind of what to do and be on the phone and not have to see it. That's a great idea.
Yeah. And Linda. Linda, you still with us?
I'm with
maybe
you.
Unmuting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I was just thinking through the equity issue. I think sometimes not even so much on the young people's end, but even I have some older mentors, right, that are not comfortable with doing video chats, getting on videos and things like that. And they're not, I don't want to say willing, they're not willing to do it. So I think a lot of times I've had to step in connecting with the young people more than their actual mentors. So there are things, the things that are working more is just sending something in the mail or going to drop off a package if you can. What I've learned too is that this is affecting everyone so differently, right? So even some of the mentors, things are affecting them in a way that is not allowing them to fully be at their capacity to support a young person. So we as a program has more kind of been doing a lot of the check-ins with the kids. But one thing that I wanted to suggest that I've told a lot of the mentors that have been willing to do it, there's that app House Party. I don't know if anyone is aware of it, but it has games on it. So for kids who just need to do something, you just get on House Party and there are different games like Heads Up, different things that come up that you can play while you're doing the video chat. So that's been helpful for some of our mentors that are able to do it with their students.
I think one of the many important things you were saying in your comments, Linda, was the role that programs can play right now, and that when you're able to step in and sort of fill in gaps where mentors aren't, for whatever reason. And an important one that you cite is kind of the generational differences in comfort with technology. And that, what you all are thinking through is, okay, then we need, we can step up and we can do some of the outreach and contact in the place of the mentor, at least during this time period, to sort of hold things over. And I think thinking about that as well is really important.
I lost who is next.
I think it's me, Mobile.
Oh, good.
Hi again. I remember what it was, just super quick. So another way that the youth group is using to connect with each other is they have a standing Friday, like 15-minute Zoom connection where each of them come with just one joke and coffee. And I forget their clever name for it, but it's like a joke and coffee hour, clever name they put on there. But they essentially just come prepared to tell one silly joke so that everyone leaves sharing their voice and also leaving with a laugh. And that's their way to not focus on all the negative information or the news that's coming out, but just to really connect in a way that's positive, fun, funny, lighthearted on a weekly basis so they can have that dose of joy every week. And I think that stood out for me. It's just like having that spot of joy lifted up. It's really hard during these times, and I appreciate that they're dedicating time and energy to do so.
Yes. Yeah, it really kind of dovetails too with a comment. Looks like Joel put in the chat box about how young people are having to assume the caretaker role. And so having to, you know, step in and be parents at times for various reasons. You might have a parent who's a frontline worker and they're out. And so then you have to take care of the siblings who are at home, or you're just having to fill in where a parent's not maybe even functioning very well under these circumstances. Lots of reasons why kids would be moving into that caretaker role. And so anything that gives these young people a chance to be a kid again for a few minutes is really important. So that kind of ideal that you were just saying, Mobile, about, you know, showing up for coffee and a joke gives them a chance to kind of get away from the other, you know, the many roles and responsibilities they're carrying in their lives, and to just be a kid for a little while again.
Yeah, yeah. And did you want to get to Leah's comment, Janine, please?
Oh, sure. So Leah, and I think she had to step out. She's from Family Services in Merrimack Valley. And I think Linda touched on it a little bit, just again, how much when, you know, everyone's struggling during this pandemic. So in terms of how much we pressure, not sure if that's the right word, but pressure our mentors to reach out, connect, as you're trying to negotiate what their needs are as well. And so her staff is really struggling to figure out, okay, well, I want you to connect. I need you to do Zoom, but either they're not comfortable or they've got their own stuff going on. So I wanted to understand like how much, you know, you balance that.
Yeah, so, you know, I'll say my bit, but you guys are the real expert on this. So I have a vantage point of sitting here and being a researcher and interviewing a lot of people and hearing about these relationships. And I have really strong feelings about this. So let me, you know, just like say that from the start, which is I think when you sign up to be a mentor, there's a responsibility that you take on that's really important. And it's not just to discount that the mentors are struggling as well, because they are, they're human beings, right? We're all struggling in these times in our way. So it's not to discount or not recognize that, but to say, yes, and what can you do for this young person, because you did sign up for this, you're in this relationship, this kid really needs you now, and how can we accommodate or work this or something to make it possible for you to be present in some way, shape, or form in this child's life. I think sometimes, I mean, I've seen this a lot in the interview-based research that we've done, is mentors really often don't understand how important they are. And if they're not getting direct feedback about that, or being told directly by the child somehow that they're important, it's as if they're not, or they don't, you know, or I see this kid has so many other struggles, how could I really matter? Or this kid has all these other adults in their life, how could I really matter? And so it might be right now, how could I really matter? There's so much else going on. And I think sometimes there's a lot that has to be invested in reminding mentors how much they do matter, and that kids do notice when they're there and when they're not there. And even if they're able to show up in some very small way, that is so much better than not showing up at all. The worst thing a mentor could be doing right now is just simply disappearing on a kid. So some semblance of showing up in whatever form that takes would be better than not showing up at all. And I think finding ways to work with mentors to be able to do that. And as you say, as you're saying, being able to accommodate that they've got their own struggles and needs as well. But then what can you do given these constraints? What is it can you do, and how can we support you in you know, maintaining that presence in this child's life in some way, shape, or form?
So I encourage.
So you know, I prefaced, I have strong feelings. So
and I want to encourage you all to read Renee's research on closure, because she has a lot to say about these mentors and why things end. Because it's really helpful, because I think it's how we prepare the mentors, and also right now how we support them. Renee, tell me if you think I'm off base here though. So a lot of these mentors who are feeling like they can't do something, it may be that they can do something small and they're feeling like it needs to be a lot. And if we heard what Renee was saying, it doesn't have to be a lot. And so maybe we can also do some support to say, you know, if you could just send one postcard to say, hey, I'm here. I hear that this is hard for a lot of people. I'm thinking of you and I'm hoping the best for you. That might mean a lot to somebody. And it doesn't have to be a lot. And maybe they're sitting home going, oh my gosh, I can't take on another child when I have 3 in my home. Or I can't, or when, you know, so we might have to do some education and some support. And just as the EEP says, proper orientation and training and match support matters, right now, we might need to do some re-education and retraining and reorienting because the world's different. And so it might mean that we need to do a little bit extra, and extra match support might be helpful. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not a researcher, so I don't have data.
No. I really do agree with that of, you know, trying to offer that scaffolding to help mentors do whatever it is they can. And, you know, some kind of outreach, some kind of connection is just so much better than nothing. One of the things that's helping me get through this pandemic is thinking about you and remembering that you're there. You can even say that to the kid, you know, I mean, like just anything that helps you stay connected.
Yeah. Any other? I have a question that might help us in a different way. I'm thinking though, Renee, when we're talking about how important this is, and you know, we're talking to the converted, like we all know this, we believe this, right? We all work with young people or got here for some reason, and we all have really good stories and narratives of that. How do we though tell the world this? Right? We need other people to understand that this matters. And, you know, at our office, we were talking that, yes, the young people also need education, right? So that the learning gap is going to get greater. We're talking about that. And people need their food and people need access to healthcare, and they need a lot of things too. But they also do need these relationships. And as the rug gets pulled out from people, as I say, it's like, but still if someone said, hey, I'm still thinking of you, that's like one more like supportive network in their system. Yes. And so we're trying to say, how do we also share that with the world? The world of our stakeholders, because that's a really important question for all of us as people who believe in young people, that we need to advocate for that too. And it's not an either or, right? We want people to have all those really basic needs, and the economy needs to come back for all those things, but we also need this field to stay afloat. And we're worrying about our nonprofits as well. Let's be real, right?
Yeah, right. Because you know, everybody's worried about their survival in some way, shape, or form. I mean, you know, interesting thing for me is, you know, I think that this is just as much a basic need as any of these other things. You know, that relationships and connections are a fundamental, basic human need, and I think the evidence is moving more and more in that. I mean, I think the evidence has always been there, but it takes new forms. The latest version of this that I think is really helpful is people are talking about social isolation and how devastating social isolation is. So there's really good evidence now that social isolation is akin to smoking, not exercising, high blood pressure, you know, these kinds of things that can have similar sorts of physiological effects on people. So I think that is a hot topic, if you will, in a lot of fields. People are really queuing in, and that's sort of a direction where research is going to go in social isolation. I think that's going to help all of us in this field as they continue to sort of show how critical that is for people's health and well-being, not just their psychological health, but also their physical health and well-being, which is really interesting, I think. So that's one strain I think that's going to work in our favor. And I've been watching that literature with keen eyes, paying attention to what they're finding, because I think it's really important. There are a couple of us that are working on a new article for a series called Future Direction of Children, and it's one of these outlets where you kind of take stock of the field. And we're still talking about our ideas, but one of the things that we've been kicking around, I think is going to be a central part of this piece, is that you know, it's kind of like chasing rainbows in the field of youth mentoring. We talk about these outcomes, that mentoring is going to produce X outcome. And some forms of mentoring can do that. So if you have a program that's designed for a very specific purpose, then you can measure that outcome, right? But another outcome of mentoring are these kinds of aspects that we've been talking about, which is it's good for one's psychological and physical health to feel connected to other people. well, that's not a specific outcome that you then measure. So we're working on how to, on this article, trying to make this argument of how we need to think about how we measure mentoring differently, how we both conceptualize and measure mentoring differently, because we've been kind of going at this in kind of the wrong way. And I think that sort of cues up funders to then sort of say, well, what's the specific outcome? I'm going to see the results on your 6-month outcome. Well, that positive childhood experiences study I was telling you about, where that adults, people in adulthood are healthier and happier if they had good relationships when they were kids. That's a pretty important outcome, but I can't tell you that's a 6-month outcome of my program.
Yeah.
Right. But so there's a way in which some of us in the research field are on this and thinking about this and trying to find ways to make this argument as well of just how this is a fundamental basic human need. We all need it. Adults need it too, by the way, right? But if we want to think about promoting good development for kids, then having strong connections is as critical as these other things: good nutrition, good health, safe schools. This is all part of the same package.
I'm just wondering about all of you and how you're bringing in your stakeholders right now and connecting with your community or collaborating with others. Because really, when we're thinking about schools who are trying to connect with young people and other people in your community who are trying to do this, I also feel like we have a perfect moment to collaborate, maybe in ways that some of us haven't done before. Maybe it's what we always have been doing. But I also feel like as a field of youth development and mentoring, we have a moment in time to also say, hey, we've got something that we can do with you. And we're an added bonus with you. We're just one more relationship for young people. And so it's an amazing time for us to also now kind of embrace our communities. So some of us do that by the way our program is designed, and other of us haven't been doing that. So I'm just kind of wondering what people think about this as this moment.
We did see a hand from Yarimar, I believe.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a little bit on that topic. So my name is Yarimar. I'm from Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Mass, Metro West. And I was wondering on the topic of recruitment. Recruitment is typically hard in itself. Our agency has made a DEI committee, so we're intentionally trying to recruit, people of color, males, LGBTQ plus community. So I was wondering if anyone has maybe any advice or things that have worked for them. We're still trying to virtually interview folks and also virtually still make matches. And then hopefully in the future, they'll get to meet in person and enjoy activities. But at the same time, I even thought maybe joining random Facebook groups just because everybody's online and putting either a flyer or something that might catch someone's attention. But I'm just curious of strategies or anything that people maybe is working at this time for recruitment.
Yeah, good question.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard a lot of talk about this, so I know people out there have been thinking about this.
The perennial problem in mentoring, right? Getting enough mentors and a diverse pool of mentors.
Anybody want to step up? I know some of you. I won't call you out though.
Well, I'll say something and then others can jump in, but but I'll say one of the things that I'm really interested in and done some work around is youth initiated mentoring, where you get young people to identify people in their social network. And then the program vets and screens and trains them and all, just like you would any other mentor. So they have to go through that same process. And then, and we've seen some good success with that. I'm also working with a colleague on thinking about how to train, where in fact, we're going to, if this gets funded, we'll work with a Big Brother, Big Sister program in Arkansas of tapping the caregivers of the young people to identify people in their social network to recruit. And then same thing, they have to go through all the regular procedures of the program, but kind of finding other ways to tap people, I think is one thing that the field could really be thinking about, and the ways that we've traditionally thought about it, and tapping the sort of networks of the communities within which people who are coming to seek mentors. I think there's a lot of resources within those communities that we've largely not really thought strategically about how to kind of enlist the support of those folks as well. We did this one study I did, really small scale, is to a person. The mentor who got identified said they never would have signed up for a mentoring program. They were too busy, they're too this, too that. But when that kid asked me to do it, I was there. Sure, I would do it. And then they, went through that and then became the formal mentor. So I do think there's this untapped pool of people who are not going to self-select in, if we could try to figure out how to get to them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, sorry to jump in, a lot of people don't even think about being a mentor until someone's asked. Like the same, I got, a question, someone said to me the same thing, like for a board member, like I didn't feel comfortable signing up until I was actually asked. So same thing, I think, for becoming a mentor.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And maybe, working with communities to help communities understand what mentors are, what they can be, the kinds of programs that they could be working with, kind of like almost like public service for the adults. We think about, helping kids understand what a mentor can do for them, or maybe helping adults understand the really important role they could be playing in a young person's life.
And I think as we try to virtually bring people into mentoring, that if someone knows somebody, it's a lot easier to make a virtual connection, right? And so if they're just starting a relationship and it needs to start virtually, if I've already said, my coach is who I want, and I've already know them, or my third grade teacher was someone I loved, Mrs. Kowalski, by the way. I know that I could already, she read Trumpeter of the Swan to me. I will never forget her, right? And so I know that she was somebody, like I already have some sort of connection. So if I have to start to get to know her online or through some other kind of activity, I think youth-initiated mentoring may be a way to consider something right now for programs who might never have started it. Because there's some already relationship there. I don't have to start to get to know you only just this way.
I also think that tapping on the mentors that are present and are doing a great job already with your program might be a good resource. And, you just want to present it that way. I want to find more people like you in our program. Do you have any recommendations? Anyone that you might can bring in, because now more than ever we need you. So just one.
I think Joel has a comment that he wants to share. And then I will note Kristen and some other folks shared some tips in the comment section as well. Folks want to read those.
Great. Joel.
I'm muting here, so forgive me if I have two kids in the background. Joel Mora from the High Square Task Force, just jumping on the recruitment piece, and I think it's more just sharing instead of a comment. Majority of our mentors, close to 90% of them are college students, so for us it depends on when the colleges reopen. So it's going to be difficult for us to be able to go to volunteer fairs or recruitment fairs that we normally go to and get a majority of our students. And I think the second thing that we're going to be looking into closely and waiting to see what we can do is the Corey-Sorry process, and making sure that we're able to follow the proper guidelines, because normally we would just do everything in person, collect documents, make copies, but now that we're social distancing, that's going to be something that we're going to need to figure out and do with our volunteers when we start back up in September. One idea that I was thinking of potentially is keeping in touch with the volunteers that we currently have that are in college, because we know that many of them are either doing summer programming or are away, can't technically be away, but are off. So staying in touch with them over the summer and hoping that we can re-engage them back in the fall and potentially in the spring. So also setting a challenge to them and say, can you bring one person on? So if we had 20 mentors that we had in one group, that could potentially double our cohort right there. So that's one idea we're going to look into seeing we can potentially do, but everything depends on how the colleges fare in the fall, because many of us who do rely on college mentors, it's going to impact us, and also the core resource. Just curious to see how that's going to work too.
Yeah. Janine, you want to go to some of your comments?
Sure, I will share. Kristen has, she responded that they're planning a virtual recruitment event. I don't know if she wants to share what that looks like or you know, what you're thinking about. I know PYD is a really innovative and creative organization, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure, I can share. Our ambassador of mentoring is working to plan a recruitment event right now, a Facebook Live event, and it'll actually be interesting to see if we're able to get more people because we serve the 128 loop or the greater Boston area, and it's often hard to get people physically to come to Boston. So I unfortunately don't have results yet because it's happening in June, but we're excited to try that out. But then one question I had that we've been thinking about that's a specific pandemic challenge in terms of marketing is that we are a community-based mentoring organization, and right now we're doing everything online. So we're still doing match meetings virtually, interviewing, etc. And so it's a little bit tricky in terms of marketing because I'm putting out, it's an in-person model, but we are doing online right now. And I think the challenge is trying to predict when we'll be in person because since I've put it out there that we're online, I actually put that on Volunteer Match and I got mentors from 10 different states, which is great, but also I'm thinking we will be within the year going to be in person. So I don't necessarily want to take them on, even though they could be great mentors right now. So I'm just curious if others have kind of had ideas on that marketing challenge and the timing of everything being so unknown.
Yeah.
I have a thought. It's not like a marketing response necessarily, but a similar thing with Silver Lining. We serve youth impacted by foster care, typically in that 128/Greater Boston area. But we are also exploring how can we serve more young people who are out in like Springfield or like Worcester who could really benefit from a mentor, particularly during these times. And so I think one of the things we're looking at is, are young people interested in having a virtual mentor, even if it means never moving into the physical space? And so having that conversation with young people directly to say, are you looking for a mentor who is a physical in-person mentor, or are you okay with just having this sort of connection where you wouldn't have the connection otherwise? So that mentors, and we can market that to mentors saying, we typically have this in-person model where mentors are meeting with young people, but there's a niche of young people who need mentors who are only on the virtual space, who aren't physically close to us, but you could serve that as that person. So I think that opens the doors to a lot more folks who aren't located within the greater Boston area. So similar to you, we don't have results, but it's something that we're exploring. But I think that in terms of messaging, just if there's an opportunity for young people to opt into that in-person piece, or if it's an expectation that everyone moves into there, is being clear about that when reaching out to folks. So it can be like, you know, if it's a short-term opportunity or a longer-term opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
I do think I've been kind of following this closely because I'm in the higher ed sphere and thinking about what our fall looks like and all of next, and all that. And I just think we have to be prepared to potentially be in a virtual world for a long time, potentially. And so kind of what is, maybe going in and out of in-person in a virtual world for some time. So I think thinking about those different strategies about, there might be young people who would be fine with a fully virtual relationship, and that would be better than waiting, a long time or waiting for a mentor or, these kind of stopgap. I know there are, like the Big Sister Association does some events for girls who are waiting for mentors. So there's like, this isn't your forever match, but here's some things we can do in the interim, until we can kind of get to this other kind of space. So I think all kinds of ways to be creative, and in the meantime, ways to connect virtually, I think is just going to be important. I think it's a tool we'll be using, until there's a vaccine. I think we'll be using it in some way, shape, or form for some time.
And I think we're going to go to Tamika for our final question.
Hi, yes, I'm in the AOM for Substance Test Mentoring Program. I have a question about mentee recruitment, especially during this time. Many of our students, as everyone else mentioned, are in a vulnerable population and they're currently navigating school online for the first time, assuming the role as caregiver for their younger siblings. So maybe having a mentor is not on their mind right now. And so we usually recruit at the end of the year for so that they can get established with their mentor over the summer and then start meeting with their mentor when the school start. So I was just wanting to see if you all had any suggestions on ways that we can still recruit mentees during this time, how we can encourage them to have a mentor. And so I just asking for any tips that you all may have.
Any thoughts? So, you know, one of the things that Mass Mentoring has always believed in is that, you know, mentor training is another really important factor. So how do we get young people to start believing that they need to create a social network? And I think, I'm not sure what you were thinking about when you put up the slide, Renee, of John's.
Yeah, the network of relationships.
Network, but, right, but that young people need to start believing and understanding that social networking is part of life and that they are in control and that they can create their own social networks and why it's important. And that we really want to empower young people to kind of become the creators of their mentor system. And I think that there's like lots of ways that we can do that as adults in lots of settings. And so maybe we also have to kind of start switching that mentoring can happen in lots of different ways, but that young people can then start to design and develop and create spaces where they are starting to choose. So it doesn't have to be formal structured mentoring, but yet they're going to start to add adults to their life in different ways and be able to access them when they need them and how they want them and where they want them and get different things from different people, just like we all do in all kinds of settings. And I don't know if you want to, Jeannie, can you want to speak a little bit about what John has to say about this?
I'm sorry, about Sean or John?
John's. Well, is this related to what you're?
Oh, John Zaff. Oh,
yeah.
You're asking about that slide that I had sort of had as a back pocket slide. Yeah. So yeah, it was very much along those lines. There's a lot of uses for that slide. It's a great slide where you talk about kind of this network of relationships.
Yeah.
And really so you've got the young person at the center and you've got all of these different spokes going out. And so, you know, I think we've moved beyond this, but there have been times when we've really thought in the mentoring field as kind of this mentor youth dyad relationship. And there's kind of one relationship and we put all of our eggs in that sort of basket. When the reality is young people are in these webs of relationships. And there's a couple of folks who think about this in workplace mentoring as well, that, you know, we don't work for one company anymore. We have multiple jobs over the course of our career. And so you need lots of mentors along the way, and sort of taking that same idea and training young people to be thinking about their network of relationships. And I think it can be helpful for programs to think about this as well, that there may be a kind of relationship that you're used to providing, as we were talking about earlier. The model I'm used to doing is that community-based in-person model. That's one of my all-time favorite models. That's really near and dear to my heart. I think that's such a powerful model, but we're not able to do it right now. So what else could we do? And what other form could this take? And that can be also very powerful. Beth was talking about her teacher who read the Trumpet of the Swan, and that was an endearing sort of, you know, enduring moment for her. There are people who are mentors that they don't even know were our mentors. So there's lots of ways that adults can get involved in young people's lives, and they may be different from how we've been conceptualizing what we've been trying to do as a program. And in these current times, what else could we do? There's still lots of ways to connect with kids and connect kids with adults. But I think this mentee recruitment question that sparked all of this is really important, is how to help young people sort of have this be on their radar. And so one thing is helping young people understand, but it was also raised of like, how do you reach them right now? If they're not logging in, you know, if they're not at school, so you can't get them that way. I mean, there's some real challenges to reaching young people. This is one of the things I'm worried about, are these young people that we're not seeing in any way, shape, or form right now, that are really isolated. And I'm really worried about them. I'm not sure how we get to them. But it sounds like you guys are thinking about that, which gives me hope that we'll figure out a way to get to them.
And actually, Renee, I actually have one last question for you. And I don't know if we can, actually, Janine, can we just go back so we're not staring at a slide that's relevant? So my question for you though, and this came from a conversation that we were having, you were talking about though, there's lessons learned here that we kind of all operated in this mentoring as if, like this is as if, and we're, if mentors and mentees can't meet, then they can't meet, but we're learning things from this that are going to carry over. And I'm just wondering if you could kind of speak to some of those factors that, maybe mentoring is going to change forever. And we're learning things now that are going to change the field moving forward that we need to hold on to, and it might improve mentoring going forward. Can you just speak to some of those points that we need to remember?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much opportunity here, right, in this chaos and upheaval, which you all are living into, even by the comments and questions that you're raising of the ways that you're trying to think about doing your programs differently. How do you adapt to this current moment? And I think all of the ways that you're adapting are lessons that then can get built in. I think there are ways this is going to get baked into models going forward. And so, in these face-to-face models, when a mentor has to be gone, it's like, whoops, we can't be in touch. Well, yes, you can, because we have all these ways of now staying in touch when you can't be in person. So how could we bake that in? Kristen from PYD, you were talking about, well, we've always done this face-to-face model, and now we could tap this kind of national audience potentially if we think about mentoring a little bit differently, not maybe for all of our young people, but for some of our young people. I think these kinds of innovations are going to carry forward, which is really exciting. And I think hopefully, in some ways, I hope that what we hang on to is this sense of finding some way to connect, however great or small, is what really matters. And so that I think sometimes it feels like we have to be the big, it's like the grand gesture, the big thing, the ongoing forever relationship, all it has to be so big, when actually it can be these very small moments that can really make a difference. And I hope that we can carry that forward with us and think about ways to really build that in to what we do in engaging with young people. And I also hope that we just carry forward how much relationships matter to all of us. I mean, I can't wait till I can get back, to work, to see my colleagues in person and not on these little screens all of the time, and get back to see my friends in person. And, I hope we carry forward how much this really means to us, which I'm hoping will highlight how important the work you all do really is to all of us. It's like part of the a kind of connective fabric of our society.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. It is so refreshing to have a new voice at the table with us. We are so glad you are with us, and we hope that you'll come back. You can stick and hang out with Mass Mentoring as much as you'd like, and our network.
Always so
we have
fun.
an amazing network of people, and I know that I can speak on behalf of them. I hope that we appreciate your thoughts and your wisdom and the research that you're doing, and we encourage you to keep doing research to help us be a better field. And we hope that we can be part of that research at any time, and that, there's great things happening all over Massachusetts, and we'd love to keep bringing the great things to you and sharing it with you too. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a real pleasure for me to get to join you all and participate and hear what your challenges are and the ways that you're innovating and, responding in these just incredibly challenging times.
Yeah.
So it's very inspiring for me.
Yeah, talking to programs is the most inspiring thing. I think our team would say each and every day when we talk to programs is when we get our lift to know that people are doing this incredible work each and every day. Yeah. So I'm going to just ask Janine to go back to the slides for 1 minute for one last commercial. You can't stay long without a commercial. So I just want to thank you all for coming again, because you all are what makes us do our work the best. And we want to still stay in touch with you. And we also want to be able to serve you best. So, Dr. Spencer is here. We're hoping to bring other guest speakers on. We're developing more and more ideas. Our ideas come from what we hear from you. So again, take the survey as fast as you can, get the information to us. That would be really helpful. We are still having networking meetings every other Tuesday at 2 o'clock. You can find out more about that on our website that is on the screen. We also have the Kelly Scholarship and the Alku Scholarship are both out right now. So please, these are 2 scholarships that are available to students and will be distributed in the fall. So please go onto our website and find out about those. One is one is a scholarship that, the Kelly Scholarship is for a student and is nominated by an adult, and the Alcu Scholarship is written by a student themselves. And technical assistance is still available through the National Mentoring Resource Center, and that comes at no fee to programs. So there is money for you to get support from us for your program to help you do your work better. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that. Next slide. And again, we thank you, and we want you to stay in touch and keep doing the good work that you're doing. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you, Spencer.
Bye.
Thanks. Take good care, everybody.
Great tech support.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all, and thanks.